Welcome to a Tuts Plus Quick Tip Screencast. My name is Cheryl Graham, and in this video, I'm going to go over the revamped free transform tool in Illustrator CC. So first I want to quickly go over the free transform tool in an earlier version. This is CS5, and I'll select the free transform tool here in the tool panel, and then I can just resize this rectangle. Now of course you can do the same thing with the selection tool, so there's really no reason to use the free transform tool just to resize an object in this way. Free transform, in earlier versions anyway, works with a series of keyboard modifiers. So if I start dragging this handle in the upper right and then hold down my Command key, and of course that's Control on Windows, then I can move this corner freely. It's a little tricky. You have to start moving the corner and then hold down the modifier. If I add the Shift key to that, it constrains the movement horizontally. I'm going to undo that. Now if I start dragging and hold down the Command key plus the Option key, or the Alt key on Windows, the opposite corner gets distorted in the same fashion. If I add the Shift key to this combination, then I get a perspective distort like so. So I'm going to undo that again. I can also shear the object with the free transform tool by holding down the Command key and dragging from the center point of the bounding box. If I add the Shift key, it again constrains it horizontally. And if I add the Option key, both the top and the bottom shear equally. I'll go ahead and undo that. So up until Illustrator CC, using the free transform tool required you to do a bit of a finger dance. And it's kind of hard to get the hang of it. You have to start dragging, then quickly press the modifier keys. So let's go over to CC now and look at the new features. So I have my object selected, and the first thing you'll notice when you choose the free transform tool is that you get this giant widget on your artboard. You can grab it by the top and move it around, and you can see that it's transparent. On this widget are 4 icons. The first one is the free transform tool. Now you'll notice that the icon on the widget is different than the one in the toolbar, and that's because in CC you can use touch devices such as the Cintiq Touch. I wish I had one of those. When I hover over my object, you can see that the cursor changes, and I can resize this object and rotate it just as I would with the selection tool or the old free transform tool. When I hover over one of the sides, I can skew the object, and you can see that the cursor changes shape. I can go horizontally or vertically, and I can distort that freely. You'll notice there's a reference point in the center of the object, and it's a slightly different color than the highlight color. I can actually drag and move this reference point using the free transform tool, and now when I rotate, for example, the rotation originates at that point. I can double-click any of the points on the bounding box and make that my reference point. So if I rotate it, you can see that it rotates around this corner. The top icon in the widget is Constrain. So now when I use this in conjunction with the free transform tool, it constrains the shape to the same aspect ratio. And when I skew the shape, it constrains that as well, and this is the equivalent of holding down the Shift key when using the free transform tool before. The third icon down is Perspective Distort, and you notice that Constrain is no longer highlighted. That's because it doesn't need to be. Perspective Distort is always constrained. So I can distort it this way, so it looks like a highway receding in the distance, or on the sides. The bottom icon is Free Distort, and this has the same effect as though you were using the old free transform tool and holding down the Command or Control key as you drag. So I can drag any of these corners freely. I'm going to undo those steps, and now I'll check Constrain, and you can see what that does. So it's the same as holding down the Command key plus the Shift key when using free transform. I'm going to go back to the main free transform tool, and I'll uncheck Constrain. And if you want to, you can use those same keyboard shortcuts that you're used to with earlier versions. So I'll just drag this corner and hold down the Command key, and I'll get my free distort, and if I add the Shift key, that will constrain the movement horizontally or vertically. Let me undo that. And I can use the Command, Option, and Shift key while I drag to get a perspective distort. So if you're used to those shortcuts and you're comfortable using them, you can still do that in Illustrator CC. I'm going to deselect this object, and you see that even though I have the free transform tool still selected, the widget doesn't appear until I select an object. Adobe has added this widget and functionality to the free transform tool to make it a little more intuitive and easier to use. The widget also allows you to use the tool on touch screens where you might not also be using a keyboard. But if you're accustomed to and comfortable with the keyboard modifiers, you can use those as well.